What would you do if you woke up in the middle of the night, certain someone or something was in your house, watching you, and you couldn't call for help? It was a chilly autumn night in the small, quiet town of Willow Creek, Illinois. The year was 2007, and the streets were always empty by 9 p.m. I was home alone, a 27-year-old freelance writer working on a deadline. My parents had left for a week-long vacation to Florida, and I had volunteered to stay behind to focus on my work. The house was an old, two-story Victorian-style home that had been in our family for decades. It had its squeaky floors, flickering lights, and the occasional unexplained draft, but I had grown accustomed to its eccentricities. It was 11:06 p.m. when I first felt it, a strange, overwhelming sense of being watched. I was sitting at my desk in the living room, typing away on my laptop, when the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I froze, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. The house was silent, no creaks, no hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, no distant howl of wind, just silence. Probably just my imagination, I muttered aloud, trying to shake the feeling. But then, I heard it, a faint thud. It was soft, almost imperceptible, but it was there. It sounded like it had come from upstairs. My heart quickened as I glanced toward the staircase. The light at the top of the stairs was off, but the faint glow of the moon streamed through the skylight, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I stood up slowly, my legs trembling slightly. My golden retriever, Max, who had been sleeping at my feet, lifted his head and let out a low growl. His ears were perked up, and his eyes were fixed on the stairs. "Max?" I whispered, but he didn't respond. He just kept staring upward, his growl growing louder. That was when I knew something was wrong. Grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen drawer and walked cautiously toward the stairs. Max stayed close behind me, his growl soft but persistent. The air in the house felt heavier now, as if it had thickened with an invisible dread. I could feel it pressing against my skin, making it hard to breathe. The stairs creaked beneath my feet as I climbed them one by one. The sound echoed through the house, amplifying my fear. When I reached the top, I shone the flashlight down the dim hallway. The beam of light illuminated the doors to my parents' bedroom, the guest room, and the bathroom. All were closed, except for a slight crack in the guest room door. I could have sworn I had closed that door before I came downstairs. "Max," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Stay here." He let out a soft whine but obeyed, sitting down at the top of the stairs. I approached the guest room slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. I pushed the door open with the tip of my index finger, shining the flashlight inside. The room was empty, but then something caught my eye. On the bed, there was a faint imprint of someone or something having lain there. The blankets were slightly rumpled, and there was a depression in the mattress. It looked recent. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry. Had someone broken into the house? But the doors and windows were all locked. I had checked them myself before settling in for the night. I backed out of the room slowly, my mind racing. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe I had imagined the whole thing. But then, I heard it again, a low, deliberate creak, this time coming from my parents' bedroom. I hesitated for a moment before making my way to my parents' bedroom. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob. I turned it slowly and pushed the door open. The room was bathed in the faint moonlight streaming through the window, casting long shadows across the floor and walls. I shone the flashlight around the room, but everything seemed normal. The bed was made, the curtains were closed, and nothing seemed out of place. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Maybe it was just the house settling. Maybe. I had imagined the whole thing, but then I saw a dot in the corner of the room. Just beyond the beam of my flashlight, there was a shadow. It wasn't like the others. It was darker, more defined, and it seemed to pulse. I froze, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst through my chest. The shadow didn't move. It just stayed there, steady and unblinking. And then I felt it again, that overwhelming sense of being watched. "Who's there?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice firm. There was no response. I took a step back, my eyes never leaving the shadow. As I did, I heard a faint whisper in my ear. "I've been waiting." I screamed. I didn't wait to find out what was happening. I turned and ran, slamming the bedroom door behind me and leaning against it to catch my breath. My hands were shaking and my legs felt like jelly. But as I stood there, I realized something. The whisper hadn't just been in my ear. It had been in my head. I didn't have time to process that thought. A loud bang echoed from downstairs, followed by the sound of shattering glass. "Max!" I screamed, pushing off from the door and racing downstairs as fast as I could. When I reached the living room, I found Max cowering in the corner, his fur standing on end. The front window was shattered and shards of glass littered the floor. But there was no one there. I grabbed my phone from the desk and dialed 911, my hands shaking so hard I could barely press the buttons. 911, what's your emergency? A calm voice answered. Someone's broken into my house, I stammered, trying to keep my voice steady. Okay, stay calm. I'm going to send someone over. Can you get to a safe place? I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Yes, I'll hide in the bathroom upstairs. But as I turned to leave, I heard my name. Don't call the police. I stopped in my tracks. The voice was low, gravelly, and it seemed to come from all around me. Who are you? I demanded, trying to hide the fear in my voice. You shouldn't be here. And with that, the lights went out. I was plunged into darkness. The flashlight I had grabbed earlier was still in my hand, but when I turned it on, the light flickered and died. I was alone, or at least I thought I was. I crept toward the stairs, trying not to make a sound. The air was thick with an oppressive energy, and I could feel unseen eyes watching my every move. When I reached the bathroom, I locked the door and leaned against it, trying to catch my breath. My phone was still in my hand, but the line was dead. I was trapped. And then I heard footsteps. They were heavy, deliberate, and they were coming from the hallway outside the bathroom. I pressed my ear against the door, my heart pounding in my chest. The footsteps stopped right outside. Open the door, the voice growled. I didn't move. Open the door. Still, I didn't move. Open the door. I screamed as the door shook violently, as if something had slammed into it. The sound echoed through the bathroom, and I fell to the floor, my hands over my ears. But when I opened my eyes, the bathroom was emptied out, the door was still locked, and the house was silent. I waited for what felt like hours, my back against the bathroom door. The silence was oppressive, and I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was out there was waiting for me. Finally, I heard the sound of sirens in the distance. The police had arrived. I unlocked the door and made my way downstairs, where I found 2 officers searching the house. They had broken down the front door to get inside. "Are you okay?" one of them asked, shining a flashlight in my face. I nodded, still in shock. "What happened? Did you find anyone?" The officer hesitated. "We didn't find anyone inside. No signs of forced entry, except for the broken window." "Are you sure you heard something?" I opened my mouth to respond, but then I saw it. On the wall opposite me, in letters that seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, was a single word: mine. I didn't need to say anything else. The officers helped me gather my things, and I left the house that night, never to return. The question still haunts me to this day. What really happened in that house? And what did it mean by mine? The house on Elm Street in Willow Creek, Illinois, still stands today, but no one has lived there since that night. Some say that on quiet evenings, you can still hear whispers of a voice that growls. I've been waiting, and if you're ever driving through Willow Creek, take a look at the house with the shattered front window. If you're brave enough, ask yourself this: what would you do if you woke up in the middle of the night, certain someone or something was in your house, watching you, and you couldn't call for help? Maybe you'll never have to find out, but maybe you already know.
Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you were completely alone, yet the overwhelming feeling of being watched made your skin crawl? That eerie sensation that no matter how quiet the night is, something is lurking just out of sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. If not, then perhaps you're one of the lucky ones. But for me, that night will forever be etched into my memory as a reminder of how terrifying it can be to be truly alone in the dark. It was a cold autumn night in the small, sleepy town of Willow Creek, USA. I was 22 years old at the time, a college student living in a quaint 2-story house that my parents had rented for me while I finished my degree. The house was old, with its creaking wooden floors and dimly lit hallways, but it had a charm to it that made me feel safe. Or so I thought. It was just past midnight, and I was the only one home. My parents were visiting relatives in another state, and my younger brother was at a friend's house for a sleepover. The house was quiet, the only sound being the occasional creak of the old wooden beams and the distant howl of the wind outside. I had just finished a late-night study session and was about to head to bed when I heard it. A loud, unmistakable bang coming from downstairs. At first, I tried to brush it off as the house settling, but the noise was too loud, too deliberate. My heart began to race as I sat there in the darkness, my ears straining to pick up any other sounds. The silence that followed was even more unnerving. Slowly, I got out of bed and grabbed a baseball bat that I kept under my bed, just in case. My hands were shaking, but I knew I had to check it out. What if someone had broken in? I made my way downstairs, the creaking of each step echoing through the empty house. The air felt thick with tension as I reached the bottom of the stairs and turned on the light switch. The sudden brightness made me squint, but as my eyes adjusted, I saw nothing out of the ordinary. The living room was spotless, the kitchen was quiet, and the front door was locked. Maybe it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But then I heard it again, a low, heavy thud, this time coming from the basement. My breath caught in my throat as I froze. The basement door was slightly ajar, and I was certain I had closed it before I went to bed. My heart was pounding in my chest as I approached the door. I hesitated for a moment, then slowly pushed it open and called out, "Hello, is anyone there?" The only response was the echo of my own voice off the cold, damp walls of the basement. I fumbled for the light switch and flipped it on. The dim light illuminated the narrow staircase leading down into the darkness below. I took a deep breath, tightened my grip on the bat, and began to descend the stairs, each step creaking beneath my weight. The basement was musty and cold, the air thick with the smell of mildew. I scanned the room, but there was nothing out of place, just old boxes, a dusty workbench, and the hum of the furnace in the corner. I was about to turn around and head back upstairs when I heard it again, this time louder and closer. It sounded like someone was moving around in the shadows. I spun around, but there was no one there. My mind was racing. Maybe it was just the house settling, but deep down I knew better. This wasn't normal. I took a step forward, and as I did, the light behind me flickered and then went out. The basement was plunged into darkness, and I was alone. Panic set in. I dropped the bat and scrambled back up the stairs, my hand shaking as I fumbled for the door handle. I managed to get out of the basement and slammed the door shut behind me, leaning against it to catch my breath. My heart was racing, and my mind was filled with worst-case scenarios. Was someone really in the house, or was I just spooking myself? I tried to convince myself it was the latter, but the fear in my gut told me otherwise. I decided to call the police, just to be safe. I ran to the living room and grabbed my phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed 911. But as I waited for someone to answer, I heard another noise, this time footsteps, heavy, deliberate footsteps coming from upstairs. I froze. The line connected, and a calm voice asked, "911, what's your emergency?" But I couldn't speak. All I could do was stand there, my eyes fixed on the stairs as the footsteps grew louder, closer. And then, just as suddenly as they had started, they stopped. "Hello?" said the voice on the phone. "Hello, can you hear me?" I managed to whisper, "Yes, I think someone's in my house." The dispatcher assured me that help was on the way and told me to stay on the line. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me, and backed away from the stairs, my phone pressed tightly to my ear. The silence that followed was agonizing. I could feel eyes on me, watching me, waiting for me to make a move. And then the footsteps started again. This time they were coming from right outside the living room. I gasped, and before I could react, a shadowy figure darted past the doorway. I screamed, dropping the phone as I fell backward onto the couch. My heart was in my throat, and my entire body was paralyzed with fear. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. All I could do was sit there, frozen, as the footsteps faded away. And then everything went quiet. The house was still, the night was still, and I was still, waiting for whatever was happening to pass. But as the minutes ticked by, I realized that the fear wasn't going away. It was only getting worse. The darkness felt alive, suffocating me with its presence. I didn't know how much time had passed when I finally heard the sound of sirens outside. The police had arrived, and the noise from their cars seemed to break the spell that had been cast over the house. I found the strength to stand up and make my way to the front door, my legs trembling as I opened it to let the officers in. They searched every room, every corner of the house, but they found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no evidence of an intruder. The officers were kind but skeptical, suggesting that the noise might have been caused by an animal or the house settling. I tried to explain, but even I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe I had overreacted. Maybe it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But as I watched them leave and shut the door behind them, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I wasn't alone, that whatever had been in the house that night was still there, waiting for its next move. Do you think I was truly alone that night? Or was something else with me, watching me, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal itself? The truth is, I'll never know for sure. But I do know this: some horrors are better left unexplained. What would you do if you heard someone call your name when you were completely alone? This is the story of Alexandra Alex Harper, a 23-year-old college student who found herself alone one stormy night in her family's old Victorian home on Maple Street in the small town of Willow Creek, Illinois. It's a night that would change her life forever, and maybe yours too, if you dare to imagine yourself in her shoes. The storm rolled in just as Alex was settling into her favorite spot on the couch, a steaming mug of tea in her hands. The house creaked and groaned with every gust of wind, and the lights flickered ominously. She shivered, though the fire in the fireplace crackled warmly. Her parents were out of town for the week, visiting her older brother in Chicago, and Alex had decided to stay behind to study for her finals. The house felt bigger when she was alone, and the shadows cast by the flickering flames seemed to move of their own accord. She tried to distract herself by scrolling through her phone, but the Wi-Fi had gone out hours ago. No surprise, really. Not uncommon in Willow Creek, where the infrastructure was as old as the town itself. It was then that she heard it. At first, Alex thought it was just the house settling. Old houses like hers were prone to strange noises, especially during storms. But then she heard it again, a sharp, unmistakable knock at the front door. Her heart skipped a beat. She froze, her phone slipping from her fingers onto the couch cushions. The clock on the mantel read 11:47 p.m. Who could be visiting at this hour, especially on a night like this? She hesitated, then grabbed a flashlight from the coffee table and made her way to the front door. The storm raged outside, and the windows were fogged with rain. She peered through the pee-hole. No one was there. Shaking her head, she turned to walk back to the living room. But then she heard it again, this time louder, more insistent. Knock, knock, knock. This time she didn't hesitate. Anger replaced fear as she yanked the door open, shining her flashlight into the darkness. "What the hell?" she muttered aloud. The porch was empty, the only sound the relentless pounding of rain against the wooden boards. She stepped outside, her bare feet chilling on the cold porch. The storm was worse than she'd thought, the rain stinging her skin like needles. And then she heard it, a voice, faint but unmistakable, calling her name. "Alex, Alex, come and play." Her blood ran cold. The voice was low, raspy, and seemed to come from all around her, echoing in her ears. She spun around, but there was no one there. "Who's there?" she demanded, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to sound brave. The response was immediate. "Alex, Alex, come and play." She slammed the door shut and leaned against it, her heart pounding in her chest. She fumbled for her phone, but the screen was black, dead. Panic set in as she scrambled to find a charger, her fingers shaking so hard she could barely hold the cable steady. Once the phone was charging, she dialed 911, but the call wouldn't go through. No signal. She was alone. Alex barricaded herself in the living room, piling cushions and chairs against the door. The storm raged on outside, and the house seemed to shift and groan around her. She sat on the floor, her back against the wall, and tried to calm her racing thoughts. But then she heard it again, the voice, this time closer, louder. "Alex, Alex, come and play." She screamed, but no one heard her. The storm drowned out everything else. And then the lights went out for good. In the darkness, Alex heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate, and coming from upstairs. The footsteps started slowly, as if someone was pacing back and forth in the hallway above her. Alex's breath came in shallow gasps as she clutched her phone, now partially charged but still useless. The footsteps grew louder, faster, and then stopped. The silence was worse. Alex strained to hear anything, but there was nothing. No creaks, no whispers, no rain. Just silence. And then the footsteps started again. This time they were coming downstairs. Alex didn't wait to find out what or who was making those footsteps. She grabbed the flashlight and ran, dashing through the dark house toward the back door. The footsteps followed, echoing through the empty halls. She fumbled with the lock, her hand slipping as she tried to turn the handle. Behind her, the footsteps stopped. "Alex, why are you hiding?" the voice said, this time right behind her. She didn't look back. She flung the door open and sprinted into the storm, the rain blinding her as she ran. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she had to get away. But the voice followed her, echoing in her ears, laughing now. "You can't hide, Alex. You can't hide." The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind an eerie calm. The police found Alex's phone on the kitchen floor, the screen cracked but still glowing faintly. The house was empty, but the back door was open and her shoes were gone. Alex was never seen again. The house on Maple Street still stands today, empty and untouched, its windows boarded up. But on stormy nights, people claim to hear a voice, one that sounds like a young woman screaming for help. And if you ever find yourself in Willow Creek on a night just like that, you might hear it too. What would you do if you heard someone call your name when you were completely alone?